Hey everyone, welcome to Watch It Play Table Talk. My name is Rodney Smith, and this is
Pat McDonald.
And in this weekly segment, we take a gaming-related topic, share our initial thoughts on it, and then invite your responses through the YouTube comments and your own videos that I'll compile into next week's Table Talk Back episode, and that way we can all participate in the conversation. Speaking of which, what is our conversation here, Pat?
How to teach games.
Right, some tips for teaching.
It's for teaching.
We've talked about how people like to learn games, but this is kind of the other side of the coin. Once you've learned them, how do you then communicate that to somebody else? Because I enjoy reading a good rule book.
Who doesn't?
Right. I even don't mind the so-so rule books. But after I spent 2 or 3 hours learning the game, and now I'm sitting in front of my friends, I realize I'm faced with a very big challenge because I have to condense all that information into maybe 10 minutes, if I'm so lucky that they'd be charitable to give me 10 minutes before their eyes start glazing over.
They wander over to a different game.
Right. Wait, where are you going? Where are you going? So that is a tricky challenge. So that's what we want to talk about here. How do you overcome that challenge? How do you make it work? So Pep, let's start by giving some bullet points, a little quick overview of some of the challenges, right, that stand in the way of teaching a game.
Well, definitely if people bring bullets to the table.
Yes, don't bring a gun.
Don't bring a gun.
Although, maybe if you
Never bring a
point
gun to a
someone-
board fight.
Right. Hey, teach me this game now. 10 minutes, you've got to do it. Okay, you're right.
Time limit. Time limit's a good one right there.
The time limit can make it difficult?
Well, someone says, I've got exactly an hour before I need to leave.
Right.
It's like, this game says it takes an hour.
I still got to teach it to you,
Yeah,
and now
so now
the
you have
pressure's
that
on.
pressure. Yeah, it's like, you got to teach me in 3 minutes or else we can't even play this.
Right. That is daunting. That'll really jumble you up. And speaking of which, like a person who is teaching can easily get jumbled up. They can forget things.
And the players can forget things.
Yes.
You can mention something to somebody, and then later on they'll say, you never told me that.
Right.
Oh, I didn't tell you that, Mr. Texter.
That's right. So true. The first tip that I want to share is, and this is a little cerebral, but I want to say be prepared. I've been taught games by people that I know feel prepared, but that's very different, feeling prepared. They've punched out the tokens, they've put the board out, they've watched half a Rado video, skimmed the rule book maybe, and they're excited about the game, right?
Yeah, I've been there before.
Yes. You've maybe done that a couple of times.
Maybe.
You're excited. You're ready to sit down. Let's learn this. Let's have some fun. But they're not at all prepared to really communicate the rules of the game to someone else so that they can actually sit down and play, because they barely know the rules themselves, if at all. So my first suggestion in that being prepared step is read the rule book cover to cover. And I like to lay the game out as I'm learning and move the pieces around so that it's sort of cementing it in my mind. Here's how it actually works. They're not just concepts I'm reading about. It sort of brings them to life in front of me, which also helps me remember. Sometimes when I'm reading a rule book too, Pep, I might find certain things confusing, and that makes me go, okay, I'm going to clean this up when I'm teaching it. I'm going to change the order of things. I might even change some of the terms if I find the terms a little confusing.
Yeah, I could actually see that's good. There's kind of a negative to that too, though, in the long run, because after you've taught that to somebody, if they in turn go to teach somebody later and then they kind of need to refer back to the rule book,
right.
Suddenly they're reading the terms for things that
Yes.
that's not what that's called. Why is that there? Like, this is in a strange order.
Right. They're calling this turns and you called it rounds or whatever, right? Or they're calling this a token and you called it a tile, or maybe they had some specific term. You're right. So there is a little caveat to that, is maybe after you've taught some, if you found a better way, a more efficient way of teaching it, is you might need to clarify once the game's over, hey, just so you know, to help a shortcut here, I changed a couple of terms. When you're playing with somebody else, you might need to know these special terms or whatever. That's a good point.
And that's definitely important too, that whenever you teach a game, you want to be thorough, because a lot of games, especially in my past that I've been taught, I've played wrong for so long because I was taught the game wrong initially.
Right.
And, just little things here and there, but assuming you believe the person teaching you,
right, you pass that on.
You're just going to pass that on, and that's going to be how you play the game.
It spreads like a virus, like a bad rules teaching virus, right? Another tip I have is to teach yourself the game out loud.
Oh.
I know this could sound a little goofy, right?
Little.
But when you have to say out loud what you think you know in your head, you very quickly reveal to yourself the things you don't know. You start tripping over your words, you start repeating things, you start going down little rabbit trails. And if you have trouble saying it out loud to yourself without anyone else there and the pressure of teaching to someone, and you're goofing up, realize that's what you were about to unleash on all of your friends, right? You were about to do that to all of your friends. So better to do it apart from everyone. Just quickly, just try to run out through the concepts out loud to yourself and make sure you understand it, because it will expose the weaknesses that you might have with the rule set.
I think that's a great piece of advice for any kind of writing in general.
Yeah, that's
and on
probably
top
true.
of that, you could kind of look at it this way. Any advice you could take and put towards giving a speech, public speaking, would directly apply to teaching a board game.
That's true. Yeah.
Because it's all about how you word yourself, how
Yeah.
easy it is for you to be understood. Like you said, you want to avoid repetition. So I think it's very good.
We even do that here with these videos.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Whenever I'm writing a script, I read the entire thing out loud
Yes.
as I'm writing, because
Yeah.
otherwise it just sounds like nonsense.
Yeah, sometimes you write it seems fine on paper, but then you say it, and it's no good. Even here, as we're recording this, we might have an idea of what we want to communicate, and we might say it and trip over our words a little bit, and so we just stop and we kind of redo it again, right? Trying to find the most efficient way of communicating the information to you guys.
This take that you're listening to right now might not even be the first one. It could
might
be the
not be.
fifth one,
It could
but
be.
you don't know, because we might have gone
It's
back to
all a
reword
mystery.
it.
So to summarize quickly, you can definitely under-prepare, but you really can't over-prepare. So do your homework, basically. The other thing, and I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying about just good tips for public speaking in general, is it's good to be engaging, right? To come with a certain amount of energy, because you're going to be communicating rules which can often be a bit dry, right? So the more interesting you can be, the more confidently you know the information, then the more you can focus on being kind of interesting as you communicate the information to people.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways to do that is definitely to just let the theme of the game soak in. Maybe start off with, we're great generals fighting in a war.
Right.
But strangely, I think that very much depends on your audience. If you're playing with very intellectual people who sat down to the game because they heard it's a very challenging, thought-provoking game, they might not want to hear about how you're playing as pandas who are eating bamboo and digesting it and turning it into points.
I'd love to get that group of intellectuals around to play that game.
I know, but they might not want to hear that. But some players, on the other hand, if you just start a game up and you teach them the rules, I've taught rules to games before for people, and had them basically say, there's no theme in this. Why didn't you tell us the theme at the start?
Listen, what you're saying is great, because it really is about knowing your audience, right? You do need to know your audience on some level. If you have a group of friends and it's a mix of different types, then good luck, right? But if you kind of have a sense of, okay, these people, I know they just want to get down to brass tacks, and you might just jump into the rules. Although I agree with you, typically I like to start with the theme of the game, because I don't only want to be engaging, I want to get the players engaged in what we're doing, and so hopefully by painting a picture of the theme, that will help. A lot of
That
people,
could take some time.
painting it.
Painting
Yes, I stopped. I paint a picture. What do you think?
Do you want to play this?
Well, listen, along with painting that picture, one thing that people often say is it's best to start with the objective
Yes.
when you're teaching rules. I don't always do that. In fact, I usually don't do it. I don't do it in our instructional videos. Typically, I start with a little bit of theme, and then I start with a setup, and then I explain the objective. Because I worry that an objective without context is still kind of meaningless. So I feel like if they see the components, they see a map, they see army figures, they see cards, they see powers, then when I say here's the objective, there's kind of a framework for understanding that objective, and then I go into the main bulk of the rules.
Strangely enough, and I've experienced you doing this before, I think it leads to a problem with interruptions, though.
Oh, yeah.
And I've done it.
Yeah, sure.
You get halfway through the game, you're like, oh, you do this and you do this, and now you need to pick a character, and I'm like, that's nice. How do I win?
Right. Yes.
And, maybe you were going to explain it in a couple sentences,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
had a plan, but now you kind of feel pressured, like, oh, I got to answer this now.
No, you're right. If you don't start with the objective, that is the number one question on the tips of most people's tongues.
Yeah,
so you are
how do I
opening
win?
yourself up for that potential interruption.
And
So-
why? I love why.
What's that?
Sometimes again, people will interrupt, but sometimes people will literally interrupt to ask why.
Right.
It's like, oh, you can't look at other people's hands, and someone will say, why? It's like, because that's the rules of the game.
That is one of my least favorite questions.
Yeah, why?
I don't know why. It just is.
I think a big challenge is knowing exactly how much of a game you can teach before you want to get started.
Oh, that little pivot. We're given all kinds of rules, dense instruction. Now let's start playing, and I'll give you the rest as we go along.
Yeah, and some games know that their game is designed this way because they even involve little basic quick start rules, things
right.
like that. And some games you obviously couldn't do it with. A war game, for example, you wouldn't really be able to teach part of the rules and then get into the rest
It can
later.
be challenging, right? Because if you don't give enough information so people can make competent decisions, then that can make for a very miserable game experience. Like, oh, I just chose to do this, and now my whole army is going to be destroyed because I didn't realize the peril I was putting myself in.
Yeah, it definitely helps when teaching a game, though, when you can start into the game early. Some players aren't comfortable with that, but I think it's probably one of the best ways of teaching. It's very hands-on.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
teach exactly what you need to know to play, and then as you start playing, teach people things as they become relevant. Preferably the turn before they become relevant.
Right.
That's usually my
That's
my
a
thing
big
with
challenge,
teaching,
isn't it? Yeah.
is when I notice somebody's in an opportunity where they may be able to take advantage of a rule next turn, I would say, by the way, if this happens,
Right.
you're able to do this. And it kind of gives people that little point where it's like, okay, I still feel comfortable enough that I could do it,
Right.
but I found out.
And I'm prepared now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think another important thing is, well, I like to say, my old saying, the first game doesn't count, right? I always try to say that in the first game because some people come to the table feeling a certain pressure to win or to not play stupidly, right?
Yeah.
And I just try to, let's just diffuse that. We're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes teaching you. I'm going to forget something. And I'm going to remember as you're about to make a decision, oh, wait, no, you can't do that. So just take yourself off the hook a little bit for that first game. Let's all just figure out how it plays. Then the second game, we can come into it full force, and really try to tear each other apart.
It's definitely difficult for me because to me, the first game is my favorite game.
Yeah.
And I love winning the first game. I
Yes.
love playing the first game.
He loves winning the first game.
But I just find it's so much more challenging the first time because you don't know anything.
Right,
You
right.
come into it with no knowledge of what works and what doesn't work, and
Yeah.
to be able to turn that into a victory just feels really fulfilling.
Yeah, you're going to encounter so many more surprises that first game because you don't know what any of the cards do or any of the components do. I think it's important if a game does require you to really front load the instructional part and say, listen, no, I'm going to have to talk here for 15, maybe 20 minutes to give you everything. I think it's good to communicate that to the player so that the player can say, you know what, I'm not really up for that. I'll go step over and play something else. Give people a chance to vacate the table if it's going to be a heavier, more involved process.
Yeah, although that is a hard. It is hard to watch somebody walk away, as you're teaching a game.
It's hard to watch someone walk away. It's probably hard for someone to walk away because they feel like, I don't want to insult you, but I don't think I want to sit here for 20 minutes. But, it's also tricky too if there's not another table for them to go to.
Yeah.
Although, honestly, a game group, sometimes I've just sort of stepped up from the table and I'll just go over and I'll read a rule book if I'm to something else if I'm feeling like this isn't for me. Because I don't want to be there making the experience miserable for everybody else.
No, I agree. And strangely, you talk about being alone in a game group. Something I find interesting is when a new player comes into a game halfway through teaching the rules. That actually sounds like a negative, but to me it usually turns out to be a positive. Because
Do tell.
if you're being taught a game, you're getting the information, it's being fed at you, usually really quickly.
Yes.
And in a certain order, and then a new player comes along and says, "Oh, is there free room here? I just got here. Do you mind if I jump in?" Everyone kind of hems and haws like, "Oh yeah, we already learned most of the rules."
It can be a little distracting for
It's
the
a
rules
little
teacher too.
distracting.
But
it's really good because it means that everyone at the table is going to get to hear the rules again. And if it's your first time teaching, it means you get to go through the rules again. And now that you've taught it once, you know the concise way to bring it up.
it's true. Yeah.
And you'll walk through it. And I think the game works a lot better.
Our
that
last
way.
game group, that exact same thing happened. And my second time through, it was a little quicker. I don't think I was skipping over things. It's just, okay, I've figured out how to condense this down a little more just by having already done a little dry run with the first people that were there. That's an interesting point. So those are just a few quick ideas that we have. I want to save some of the good ones for you guys as well. So we'll stop here. And if you have some thoughts, put them in the comments below. Some things you've learned about teaching games, maybe some mistakes you've made in the past that people should avoid. Also, if you'd like to record a quick video, keep it to 1 or 2 minutes. Upload it to Dropbox or Google Drive, send me the link, and if I can, I'll try to work it into next week's Table Talk Back episode. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.